Well, ladies and gentlemen, as the illegal alien riots continue to rage on in Southern California, some very curious information regarding California Governor Gavin Newsom has come to light, and I have a feeling that all of you are going to want to see this. Now, as you all know, Los Angeles has faced 4 consecutive days of anti-ICE, anti-Trump, pro-illegal alien riots, and honestly, as things are looking right now, these riots have no end in sight. In fact, take a look at this. Right now, there is a far-left radically progressive group called No Kings planning a nationwide Day of Defiance on June 14th, this upcoming Saturday, with each one of these blue dots representing a location at which they're planning a riot, just like the one that you've all seen in Los Angeles. So folks, the unfortunate reality is that this entire situation is just getting started. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. As these riots have been unfolding under the supervision of California Governor Gavin Newsom, Americans have been digging a little bit deeper into Newsom's political history, and something very peculiar has been exposed. You see, as we now know, for at least a decade, maybe even longer, Gavin Newsom's entire political career has been funded by none other than everyone's favorite anti-American globalist, George Soros. In fact, according to recently discovered public records that had been hidden in plain sight, in just the last 10 years alone, Gavin Newsom has received well over $1 million, probably more, from George Soros. Really, Newsom's entire political existence is completely bought and paid for by George Soros. But okay, so who cares? Why should we even be concerned about this? Why is this a bad thing? Well, as we all know, George Soros' ultimate goal is to completely tear down the United States of America, open borders, hundreds of millions of third world immigrants, the total destruction of the independent American economy, you name it, George Soros wants it. For decades now, George Soros has been throwing millions and millions of dollars towards the goal of destroying America, and honestly, up until President Trump came along, his plan was working. But now, folks, as all of this information is coming to light, we have some brand new polling data coming in, and I'll tell you what, right now things are not looking good for Gavin Newsom and the Democrats. And so I want you all to take a look at that, but first, I do want to say real quick that if you folks enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out.
Immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters. Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats, more so than any other group that I could find. The group of voters who became more hawkish on immigration were in fact immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
So that's on that issue. How about how they feel about kind of traditionally, historically about Donald Trump?
Yeah, so, you see this shift and you go, what is going on underneath the hood? Well, take a look, Donald Trump. You remember when he first ran back in 2016, immigrant voters were one of his weakest spots. But look at this, Trump's vote share in presidential elections among, again, immigrant citizens, those who are registered to vote. Look at this. In 2016, he got 36% of the vote. You go to 2020, 39% of the vote. Look at this, in 2024, all the way up to 47% of the vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely losing that vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely winning that vote. Again, there is no block of voters that shifted more to the right from 2020 to 2024 than immigrant voters, and Donald Trump, at least in some surveys, actually won that vote. On average, it's about equal. So there may be all this stuff, right, about undocumented immigrants and Trump being harsh on them, but immigrant voters themselves have increasingly liked Donald Trump and have increasingly moved to the right on immigration into the Republican camp.
Well, then on that, what you're getting at, how immigrant citizens, voters, feel about people in the country illegally.
Yeah, and this is where it all kind of comes together, Kate Baldwin. Look at this. The net favorable rating, immigrants who are here illegally, among immigrant citizens, again, those registered to vote. In 2020, look at this, plus 23 points on the net favorable rating. But look at where we were in 2024, minus 6 points. underwater. So immigrant citizens have become increasingly unfavorable in their views of those immigrants who are here illegally. So I think it's so important when we're talking about this debate from a political angle to separate those out who are undocumented immigrants versus those who are here legally and those who are citizens and those who are voters, because that group of voters has felt increasingly distant from those immigrants who are here legally. And so again, when we're talking about this, at least from a political angle, this is why Donald Trump feels so comfortable, because in fact, amongst the group that you would think that would be most opposed to this, in fact, they become increasingly favorable, not just towards Donald Trump, but towards a Republican point of view on immigration and becoming distant from those immigrants who are here illegally.
Yeah.
And so now, folks, I know that was a lot, but as you can very clearly see, Americans across the country are just completely done with the Democrats' radically progressive agenda. The truth is, in just the last several years, the overwhelming majority of Americans have come to agree with President Trump's hardline stance on immigration. The border needs to be shut down, and every single illegal alien needs to be deported. Back in 2017, many Americans still showed some hesitancy about President Trump's goal of locking down the southern border and carrying out mass deportations, but now, the illegal alien invasion has gotten so bad that Americans across the country, even many Democrats, have been forced to come to terms with reality. As everyone in the country is sitting here watching these riots unfold in Los Angeles continue, everyone is asking themselves, man, do I want my town to look like Los Angeles? And the answer is a resounding no, absolutely not. Everyone knows that what's going on in Los Angeles right now is a direct consequence of the Democrats' radically progressive, incompetent leadership, and no one wants it. The reality is, nobody wants their city to be taken over by illegal aliens and all of the problems that they bring into the country with them. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. According to a brand new poll that came out just earlier this morning, only 34% of Americans nationwide have a favorable view of California Governor Gavin Newsom, and the reason why is because Americans across the country can clearly see the degree to which Newsom has completely ruined the state of California. But now, as I'm sure you've all seen, right this very moment, the Democrats, like California Governor Gavin Newsom, are trying to call these riots peaceful protests. In fact, take a look at this.
Well, John, last night we actually saw that our law enforcement, there was Molotov cocktails being thrown at them. They were being bombarded by rocks being thrown at them as well, pummeled. Again, fires being lit, public property being defaced. So for them to say that they have this under control, it is just absolutely false. But they've been saying that since the beginning. Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have been saying that this is mostly peaceful. When Americans have eyes and ears and they can see for themselves that these have not been peaceful protests, as cars have been lit on fire and our law enforcement has been assaulted. So we would like for local and state law enforcement to actually get this under control, John. But I think President Trump is absolutely showing leadership here by calling in for more resources so that we can make sure LA communities are safe and that American citizens are safe.
And so, folks, that really is the most important thing here. Under the leadership of the far-left radical progressives, Americans are not safe. American lives have been endangered and American needs have been ignored. But now that President Trump is back in the White House, finally that is starting to change. Finally, at long last, all of these people are starting to get held accountable. In fact, take a look at what Border Czar Tom Homan had to say about that.
For those protesters that cross the line, I've said it many times, you can protest, you get your First Amendment rights. But when you cross that line, you put hands on an ICE officer or you destroy property, or I say that you're impede law enforcement, or you're knowingly harboring, concealing illegal alien, that's a crime. And the Trump administration is not going to tolerate it. You cross that line, we're going to seek prosecution in the Department of Justice.
And so, folks, he's not all talk. Already, these people are starting to be arrested and held accountable by federal law enforcement. In addition to all of the federal ICE agents, President Trump has called in hundreds of DHS agents, 4,000 National Guardsmen, and 700 U.S. Marines. The truth is, right now, President Trump is cracking down on Governor Newsom's lawless anarchy zone, otherwise known as Los Angeles, in a way that we have never seen before. And really, President Trump is doing all of this in order to send a very clear message to every single radically progressive politician in the country that's currently operating a sanctuary city, refusing to abide by federal immigration law. This is what happens. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but at the end of the day, every single illegal alien in the country is going to be apprehended, detained, and deported. And you want to know why? Because that is what the overwhelming majority of Americans just got done voting for, to finally put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.